by the, I guess I have to restart. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the PRME 2024 Global Forum East Hemisphere Finance Session. PRME is a brief of the principles for responsible management education. It is a strategic initiation by the United Nations since 2007. It aims to raise the profile of sustainable education in business and management through 7 principles. The 7 principles are purpose, values, teach, research, partner, practice, and share. The initiatives focus on aligning academic institutions with the work of the UN Global Impact in the dimension of sustainable development goals, so that the future leaders can be equipped with the skills in balancing economic, environmental, and social goals. So to today, it has been 16 years after the initiation, and with collective efforts from the UN Global Impact, universities, industries, and policymakers worldwide, PRME now has over 800 signatory members from 96 countries, forming 17 chapters around the world. And since the PRME and UN Global Compact offer a framework to continuously improvement in business practice and education that focus on foster the sustainability and ethical conduct. So these ongoing guidance and practice have become one of the major indicators in higher education accreditation. And many of the member universities has adopting this accreditation criteria, for example, University of Sydney and University of Adelaide. And so today in this session, we are honored to have 5 well-respected academic leaders from prestigious universities in the Asian Pacific region to share experience and initiatives in their corresponding institutions and universities or the countries around the PRME issues. So they are Professor Senlin Ben, the Dean of Zhejiang University International Business School, Professor Kalok Chan, the Dean of the College of Business and Chair Professor of Finance at the City University of Hong Kong, Professor Eric Knight, the Executive Dean of the Macquarie Business School, and Professor of Strategic Management in Macquarie University. And Professor Fiona Yap, the Head of School of Economics and Public Policy at the University of Adelaide, and Dr. Shumai Akhtar, Associate Professor of Finance at the University of Sydney Business School, and then myself, Mei Junqian, Professor of Finance and Academic Dean at the Zhejiang University International Business School and a distinguished visiting professor at the Tsinghua University School of Public Policy and Management. I'll chair the session, and I feel very honored to chair the session with such respectful professors and deans. So, and Alex, you have met. So Alex is from UNPME. He will provide the sectorial and the technical support for our session. And so for some of the speakers, I have known for 18 years. And for some other speakers, I know 2-3 years. But one thing in common is I have always been impressed by each of them in their respective field, in the research or expertise as management or their university leadership. So it's really an honor to have them in this session. So today, our speaker will share cutting-edge research, innovative teaching methodology, and insightful thought, insightful leadership, all centered around the crucial aspects of responsible management education with their respective school, university, and the country. So Alex, I think when we miss Professor Ben, I just realized that. Earlier I thought I see him, but now I don't see him. Alex is, yeah. Anyway, so in that case, I'll skip the, so I was planning to let Ben introduce their ecosystem first. So the very first principle in PIME is the purpose. And the purpose is to advance responsible management education to foster inclusive prosperity in a world of thriving ecosystem. And so somehow Professor Ben is not here, so let me check on the backstage. But so they actually in Zhejiang International Business School, they have this practice in time for quite some years. So this will be very good for him to start. But then the next thing is I actually think Eric is also a very good person to comment on this because the University of Macquarie is very outstanding in its applied research. And it has many industry and university, and also the country has many advantages in terms of sustainable development. So Eric, could you share or how, in your business school, how the education and research collaborates with the industry and the regulator, and the students, how this sort of the ecosystem forms, and how do you value them? And in particular, anything related to PIME practice, you can share with us, that'd be great.
Thank you, Meijing. Well, firstly, thank you all for having me. And I'm broadcast here from Sydney, Australia, on the land of the Gadigal people of the Aurora Nation. And I want to congratulate you, Meijing, for organising this event for PRME, because I think that it's organisations like PRME which remind us that even though we are in business schools, we are also part of public universities. And as such, we're part of a social contract between the university, students and the citizens, government and business, to be able to have a social contract where we are able to help in a wider sense. And I think that social contract is dynamic and constantly evolving, but it's our ever constant purpose. And so at Macquarie Business School, we think about many ways to encourage staff to do that, track the sorts of impact. And it's not just in one measure. We think about the impact of our research. So not only being able to publish in the very top tier journals in the world, and we'll all know those journals, but for that research to also have an impact with government, with industry partners, to be able to transfer that into being. And so I'm having a dinner later tonight with a number of our research partners. Sometimes that's policy influence, sometimes that is helping better decision making inside organizations. But the whole research impact agenda is a very important part of this. In education, I think we're transforming lives. And I think we think about this in terms of how we are able to elevate to people's consciousness and understanding principles of sustainable development. For example, we incorporate sustainable development as the capstone of our Bachelor of Commerce. And so this is a way in which we try and bring this into the learning outcomes for our students across a variety of different areas. And then finally, we talk about our community engagement and our internal engagement. I think part of responsible managers is making sure that we are diverse business schools, that we have people from many different backgrounds, so that we can be very inclusive places, as you said, Meijing. But also in our student body, we are now very active in making sure that we're reaching out to regional communities, remote communities, lower socioeconomic communities, so that the power of education is widely felt. And we think that's also a really important part of our social impact. And increasingly now in Australia, the government is targeting us to focus a certain percentage of our students on these types of communities. And of course, as you know, in the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, lifting people out of poverty, is supporting widespread participation in the economy is a very central part of the SDGs and also our roles as the centres of business and economics. So this is the way in which I think as a business school, at Macquarie Business School, we've begun to think about the multiple facets of impact. I think you're on mute, Meijing. So.
Thank you, Eric, for the very comprehensive sharing. Yes, so University of Macquarie is actually quite impressed. I'm actually quite impressed about its applied research, which combine the community, society, and the government or tech students all together. And this, your over introduction gives us a very good picture of it. And thank you for sharing that. And okay, now Professor Ben just joined in. Ben, so the person who just speak is Professor of Strategic Management and the Executive Dean at the Macquarie University Business School. And so welcome, Ben, to join us. And I was prepared as the first question on the ecosystem. Okay. And Professor Ben is a founding dean at the Zhejiang International Business School. So he has been putting education ecosystem as his first principle in building that business school. So I bet he has quite some to share with us. Ben.
Thank you, Julia, and hello everybody. There was some technical issue. I was not admitted to the room here, but sorry for that. Yeah. It's a privilege to be, to be here, to be invited to speak and to share, some of the experience from ZIPS, Zhejiang University International Business School, probably one of the youngest business schools in the world. Okay, I think we are about 5 years old. And as of today, we have about students from 72 countries, which makes us one of the most international, at least from China. And ecosystem, Julia, you mentioned about ecosystem. Obviously, ecosystem is one of the key, so-called strategies for us. We have total 3 strategic pillars for ZIPS. One is, of course, global ZIPS. That means, we want to work with people like yourselves, okay? The global, academic partners, industry peers, and so on and so forth. The second one, of course, is digital. As we are speaking right now, we can use the digital platforms to make sure that we reach to, basically every part of the world. The third and most important thing is what we call ecosystem, as Julia, you mentioned. By ecosystem, we mean that ZIPS plus, okay? ZIPS plus partners. Specifically, I can share with some of you some of the examples we have. With academic partners, I won't talk too much because that's what everybody is doing already. Okay, but we do with industry association, for example. I am the founder of the Zhejiang FinTech Association as a professor in finance in FinTech. So we are like helping the industry. So our co-partner is Ant Group, which is a global FinTech leader, a spin-off from Alibaba Group. And within that industry association, we have about 75 members, leading players from the banking side, from the insurance, from the industry and technology side as well. So that part gives us a unique access to the industry players, to the government side as well in terms of think tank. And that's just one of the examples, with a domestic, say, industry association. Internationally, for example, we work with CFA Institute, which is a US headquartered global, so-called association of CFA, so-called, holders, whatever, or members. Yeah. And we work with them in terms of like a teaching side. You talk about sustainability for the same. So we have a sustainable finance curriculum, which we co-teach and develop with them and with a few others as well. So that part is something we very much cherish about that as well. And thirdly, of course, is that, what we call like international industry partners. Like we work very closely with HSBC, for example. Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation, Professor Chang, from Hong Kong, you would know, it's dearly called Hong Kong Bank in Hong Kong. Okay, so work with them, in terms of, quite a number of things, okay, including we have an international advisory board that one of the CEOs of the HSBC is sitting on our board. We also have, of course, a few other senior executives sitting on the international advisory board of ZIPS. So that part, of course, in the US, for example, we work with the, Johnson Control International, which is also very much a global Fortune 500 company. Their Asian Pacific CEO is a professor of practice, teaching global leadership in ZIPS. Yeah. So by sharing with you this is that, we believe as a young business school, we have a bit more flexibility to create something that we believe is extremely important. That means, given all the technological tools available, given the technological disruptions that are sweeping different industries, including education and the business school as an industry, we feel that we must even work more closely, to a certain seamlessly, with the industry in educating some of the best people. So from ZIP's side, one more thing I just want to say is that, we emphasize a lot more about the interdisciplinary nature of business education. Our positioning is to be a premier global business school from China, focused on science and technology, scientific entrepreneurship. We want to educate scientists, engineers, technology entrepreneurs to become better entrepreneurs. Thanks to our heritage as part of the Zhejiang University. And Zhejiang University is one of the probably most, I would say, advanced, STEM universities from China. And we are very honored to be part of this, global family. And we want to make sure that we take advantage of that kind of so-called Zhejiang University ecosystem. And also the Zhejiang enterprise or Zhejiang entrepreneurs. Okay? For many of you who know, Zhejiang entrepreneurs, they are everywhere. They are not just in Zhejiang. They are not just in the rest of China. They are in the rest of the world, basically. I go to Zimbabwe, Harare, I see them. I was in Indonesia, I see many of them. I go to Malaysia, I go to Australia, you would see. And of course, in Hong Kong, I was there. We had at least about quite a good Zhejiang Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong as well. So that's where we are blessed with that kind of ecosystem already. We just want to join hands together with them to work to help them become more global and to help the global business community to become more China proficient, meaning like when you want to educate your students, your executives to become better in doing business with China, partnering with China, I think ZIPS would like to be your gateway. Okay. Thank you. I will stop here right now. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
And thank you, Ben, for the sharing. And I doing research in comparative, which basically saying, for the same economic model or practice, there's often cross-country or even cross-industry difference, right? So for Zhejiang, this ZIPS also benefit from this unique, Zhejiang location, which is a pioneering fintech industry, the world well-known entrepreneurs, and it is also a pioneering in China in terms of green finance. So this is also a lot of things that ZIPS could rise on. I feel like one of my jobs should convince you to have our ZIPS join to adapt this UNPRME in our accreditation. And so also same like in Australia, you see, we have 3 speakers from Australia because Australia has a lot of advantages in its energetic production and cleaning energies and sustainability. And Eric has shared with us about how their university develop curriculums, research, industry practice, etc. And also aside, somehow at the back of my mind, I always link Ben and Eric together. I wonder why. I feel like maybe because, maybe
Blue
because
jacket.
Because Eric is smarter and sharper, but okay, that's the difference between us. Okay.
Both wear the
Yeah, I
glasses.
also feel you both share this, in this entrepreneur spirits and also articulation. Somehow you both impress me in that as well. So, but now we're going to move again to Australia. So because Australia is considered to have unique advantages in terms of clean energy and sustainable development, as I said, right? But how that has promise being translated into practice. And Professor Fiona, it will be great if you can share with us in your expertise how Australia or Adelaide or University of Adelaide contribute in this translation and all what practice your school has been doing.
Thank you very much, Julia, for that very kind introduction. Before I start my presentation, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting from Adelaide. I'm on the land of the Kaurna people, and I wish to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. And I also wish to, of course, acknowledge all First Nations persons who may be at the webinar today. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for this fantastic chance to share with such a distinguished panel. I'm going to try and share my slides right now yes. I hope everyone can see this okay?
Yes.
Great. So it's a great question. Australia is always seen as having unique advantages, as with a number of other countries around the world, where we are located so as to be able to make use of our minerals, and our natural resources. And so a good question is, in addition to, of course, making this through ensuring that the education system and academia and takes advantage and pushes through these new territories, is the rest of Australia also performing just as well? My roadmap today talks about, of course, the SDGs that were promulgated in January 2016, which were first originally adopted in 2015. But I'd very much like to talk about how we tracked and also look at the lessons from how 10 countries, the top 10 countries, tracked across time, because when we are showcasing education as an important partner, I really want to point out that this comes from a deep and thorough investigation of the situation, rather than a peripheral, we are all academics, therefore we push academics as the frontier. All right, so Australia has been great in terms of tracking its sustainability. And even in the 2019 Sustainable Report, you can tell that there were many areas where Australia seemed to track well. One of the things that and now 2019 was fairly early in this process, so not everyone has provided a sustainable report. Mostly it was only 43 countries. In 2019, Australia was ranked as 38 of the countries that were reporting. And you can see other countries, that we tend to compare against, such as New Zealand, which ranked 11. Canada, which is also considered a not too distant cousin, was ranked at 20, whereas Denmark, and we will see that that's actually consistently the case. The Scandinavian countries tend to track very well, was ranked number 1. And it's actually interesting that China, which is not always considered to have the same advantages as Australia, was ranked 39 in the 2019 Sustainable Report. If you were to delve deeper, in 2019, Australia did very well in terms of good health and well-being. But where challenges remained of the 17 SDG goals were poverty, quality education, clean water and sanitation, sustainable cities, and peace, justice, and strong institutions. There were significant challenges in about 6 categories, with major challenges remaining in 4 areas, which included climate action. Fast forward a few years, you look at the energy mix in Australia, and you'll see that there is definitely a growing reliance on renewables and a departure from coal. Although arguably, if you look at Australia, we're still performing at about what, 30-something% reliance on coal, with oil and gas next, followed by renewables. We're not there yet, and it's very clear we're not there yet, notwithstanding the significant advantages. But what about in terms of the larger 17 SDGs? In the 2023 Sustainable Report, which is the most recent report, Australia has unfortunately dropped to rank 40. And you'll see that in the areas that are colored blue or color-coded blue were ones that stayed in the same category. The ones that are color-coded red were ones that had dropped from their 2019 categories, whereas the ones that were in green were the ones that improved. So you see 3 areas that had improved in the 2023 report: sustainable development, which is decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation, and infrastructure, and thankfully, affordable and clean energy. What is concerning, though, is that in the areas where we had actually suffered setback is the good health and well-being. It went from doing well to now in a place where significant challenges remain. Clean water and sanitation are also problems. And I want to flag the one that is my personal concern, which is partnerships for the goals. Because I would like to highlight that the partnership for the goals, if we were to draw lessons from how the top 10 countries tracked across time, it's partnership between government, partnership between government, industry, and academia that elevates a country's performance. So you see that in the 2019 to 2023 comparisons of the top 10 countries, partnership is considered to be improving or on track or across a number of these countries, right? Or if they were not, they were at least moderately improving or improving and on track for the SDGs. The ones that are stagnating, where in 2019, for instance, the Czech Republic was stagnating, in Czechia fell in terms of its ranking. That, unfortunately, I think is the story that we will find for Australia, where our partnerships for goals, in other words, how well we are partnering across academia, government, and industry, is actually causing us a setback and causing us to be ranking poorer in performance. What I want to highlight is that these partnerships are actually high impact and low hanging fruits, as in it's very achievable because there are a number of important partner initiatives in Australia where we can see this effort between academia, government, and industry working together, much like what Ben and Eric had already discussed, right? The universities are always willing partners. So this is actually not too difficult a task. What we really want to do is to ensure that we do not lose sight of the fact that it is and should be a collaborative effort. I will stop there right now because I know that we have a lot of champions to hear from. And thank you for your interest so far.
Thank you, Fiona. This is very insightful, looking at this ranking and the dynamic change over time. And this is sort of a bell ringing to us. We still need to do better in terms of collaborating, academics and industry. And this sort of also naturally links to our next question, because often those collaboration needs platform, and financing is often a key to all those development and partnership. And Hong Kong has this advantages. So Eric, so Carol, I'm going to ask about you because Hong Kong is very unique for, among or in the Asian Pacific region, has its advantages as a global financial hub. Even despite the turbulence in the past several years, it's still going strong and start to revive these days. So can you introduce some of the initiatives in Hong Kong's financial markets, practice or regulations that respond to or facilitate the development trends in these days?
Thank you very much, Beijing, for the introduction. And again, thank you very much for inviting me to join this PRME Global Forum. I would like to apologize that for a bit my casual dress code because I just come back from mainland, and I just arrived back to my office 5 minutes ago. Actually, that I went to mainland because that we had a campus, City University of Hong Kong have a campus in Dongguan. And so we just went there for a retreat, and so we really took a side. I mean, took of the Dongguan development, of course, that they're knowing the development of our campus, which is something also I would say that related. I mean, that to the role of Hong Kong in developing our green finance hub. As Meijin did mention, Hong Kong is really well known for the international financial center, where the finance can really play a very key role in the sustainability. And in fact, that Hong Kong has also committed itself to the net zero target by 2050. So therefore, that the government is really in the high gear to try to really to meet this target. But I will say that at the same time that just exactly because that Hong Kong is really having this excellent finance platform, and so that's why that it had really that used that as a platform to also to develop the various kinds of the sustainable and green finance product to help Hong Kong, to help mainland, to help China, and also to help the region to really to meet the different sustainability and green finance goals. So there are a few things that I would want to really to highlight. I mean that what Hong Kong or the Hong Kong government have we been doing for the last few years. The first thing I would say that this development, the policy formulation, actually that it is really with a lot of the partnership. I mean, some speakers also mentioned partnership. So in the case of Hong Kong, so this is the Hong Kong government working in collaboration with various bodies like our Hong Kong stock exchanges, like our Hong Kong Monetary Authority that regulates the banking, we have the insurance board that regulates the insurance company, and also that our mandatory profit fund that regulates the pension funds. And so therefore that it is really through all the different regulation or that the monitoring of our financial institutions and financial system that we really hope that this can really make that a lot more of the real economy, as they are going to really to have the financial transactions, and therefore that they can also have the various of green and sustainable initiatives to be really launched. The second thing I would also like to mention, a major initiative for Hong Kong, is that in terms of our stock exchange disclosure requirement or the listing requirement. For the last few years, our Hong Kong Stock Exchange we been revising our listing codes and then making a lot and more disclosure requirement for our ESG. And so that starting really from the basic, the social as well as the governance standards, I think that the most significant one is really in terms of our sustainability. And in fact, that now that Hong Kong, our stock exchange are trying to be aligned with the international reporting standard. For example, that we have this International Sustainability Standard Board that are really promulgating, a more international and standardized reporting requirement. And then our stock exchange is going to be in alignment with that. And because of that, and so next year, 2025, all the listed companies in Hong Kong are going to have this climate disclosure risk related requirement, which is in accordance with this TCFD, that all the listed companies need to really to disclose the financial risk stemming from all this climate related exposures. And so that is going to be a significant one, and because that's going to put Hong Kong in par with the most advanced economies like in Europe, that in terms of our sustainability disclosure standard. So therefore that I have to say that because of that, and then various companies, listed companies, or that the different financial institutions are very busy to cope with this new requirements. And so at the same time, that's why I also want to say that there's also a strong push for the capacity building. Capacity building means that the infrastructure could mean the hard infrastructure, but also means the soft infrastructure, which means that it is a human talent. And so therefore, that is really the part that when we come to the business schools, when we come to the university, we have a big role to play by really providing more of the training programs to really to help the company's executives or the professionals to understand the latest needs and requirements, but at the same time that for our students enrolled in our undergraduate and postgraduate programs, we also observe that the various universities in Hong Kong are also launching new courses or even new programs to address these needs. And finally, that I also would like to say that the Hong Kong is also very much like to get involved in this carbon trading, because after all, for Hong Kong, to be the international financial center, where it does really have a lot of the international investors, and so therefore it is really quite ready to develop a platform that allows some of the companies that if they really want to have this carbon offset, to really have a certified carbon projects. And therefore that we hope that Hong Kong will really be that location, will really be the a platform that they can really resort to. And that goes to really the point that what I mentioned, that I just come back from the Dongguan, because Dongguan is really well known for this major manufacturing base, quite a lot of production, and also quite a lot of this large carbon emission. And so therefore, it is really part of this Greater Bay area in the southern part of China. And so that is really what Hong Kong would really like to capture. So therefore that we can really help those manufacturing companies, or we can help those heavy carbon emission companies to really have a platform to reduce their carbon offset. And so maybe I'll just stop here, and then later on that we have a bit more sharing.
Thank you, yeah, thank you, Carol, for the very detailed and multi-dimensional introduction about the Hong Kong government's initiative. You know, all the things dimension you mentioned are very important about a corporate disclosure, infrastructure, soft and hard like platform. And this has been, you know, as a journal editor these days, I see more and more research to address how government's initiative in those regulatory or providing infrastructure aspects are supporting or pushing the companies adopting more this carbon and net zero or the green reduce emission or adopt new technology. And these are seems to be, you know, attracting a lot of research attention. And since this is all new, and some of the findings are still yet to be found, and a lot of research, of course, already offers some insights as well. And the next slide, actually, exactly for this purpose, I wanted to ask Shumei to share. Shumei is an associate professor. He conduct quite some research on finance and ESG sustainability topics. So Shumei, do you mind sharing with us some of your key findings in your research or your colleagues' research that you think that's particularly valuable for the society or for us academics to think about education innovation?
Thank you so much, Julia, for the question. And again, thank you for organizing this fantastic session, I think. I learned something new, especially from our academics in Hong Kong and China. Fantastic. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodian of the land on which we meet today. I'm presenting today from Gadigal land of Eora Nation and pay my respect to their elders past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islanders people as well. So to answer your question, Julia, if I may share my my slides, and yeah, it will provide a bit more insight. So let's share it. Please confirm if you can see my slide.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So just a little introduction about myself. I've been working in researching in the space of ESG, sustainability, and also circular economy. That encompasses all those UN 17 SDGs. And my research is more into the empirical aspect. So in terms of, to answer Julie's question, why ESG is important and how it is you know, going to have an implication in our societies and the education. So there are several aspects of it, especially if we look at the financial performance and ESG. This is what I found doing the research in this space. So as it appears that when the corporations are spending money or making investments in the ESG, in the short term, there's not much gain. And again, these investments does take time and cost as well. But however, in the long term, you can see that it has got an implication, meaning on the profitability side of the corporations, and they make money and being sustainable and ESG compliance. So these kind of things actually tells us that the very fact that our students goes out there and works for the industry, whether they are small corporations or medium-sized businesses or even large corporations like multinationals, these students really need to, you know, be educated. And so the existing research findings basically points out that it can serve as a guidance to design more responsible educational programs to focus more on the sustainability and how to manage risk. It's not just a compliance of the ESG. By complying with it also creates some kind of risk. Some of them are we can mitigate, and some of them we may not be, which we will talk about a little bit later, especially the project I was closely involved in working with. Secondly, the impact on the investment decisions. So ESG factors are increasingly, well regarded by the industry partners, or even some of the state and federal level jobs in Australia. So investors also are chasing like where can they invest that are compliant with ESG and reduces carbon emissions and so on and so forth. So these in turn basically encourages more businesses to adopt ESG standards. Now, of course, in Australia and many parts of the world, we don't really have a set of standards or guideline per se. But luckily in Australia, especially over the last couple of months, Australian Security and Investment Commissions is coming up with a set of guidelines so that they can expect the corporations to be able to comply with those guidelines. Otherwise, each one of them, it's just individual corporations' perception of what ESG is, which may not necessarily be compliant with ESG. Okay. So the other thing is the regulatory changes and compliance. So in Australia, especially in the Senate, after the inquiry that's been done, especially in the greenwashing space and sustainability, they are pushing the Australian corporations, especially those who are earning, say, $10 million and less. And so it is going to be like introduced, this reporting requirement will be introduced slowly in phases. So there's going to be 3 pillars or 3 phases, if you want to call it. The first one was supposed to be implemented as of July this year. However, it's been deferred a little bit because all the companies are basically panicking, like they don't know what to report. They don't know how costly it would be, or they don't know like how time-consuming it might be, or what kind of information really they need to report. In any case, even though it has been deferred, but it is going to be just like I heard in here that the Hong Kong government is also requiring to comply and do the reporting. So that will be also effective for Australia, and it will increase to the medium-sized businesses and also very large corporations as well as time goes. And then how it is, like the ESG is, I guess they both are complementing each other, like technological innovation, like especially innovation plays a huge role in the ESG compliance. Like, for example, at the moment, the world is kind of flooded with many different types of data. Corporate level data and like environmental type data and geographical data. And we have got like very sophisticated tools and methods like AI and machine learnings to be able to study more on a granular level data on the carbon footprint managements. And sometimes we are even using, when I say we, as in some parts of the world, are using robots and drones even to monitor crops in a very large, hectares of land, especially in India. That's what they are doing. And just to enhance the quality of the produce or food they are growing, and also the treatment of any plant or diseases, especially when it is very complicated or very problematic for the farmers to be able to go in a deeper place of those crops where they are producing those. So this intersection basically gives us insight that the technology and ESG, it really presents a great opportunity for the institutions to develop more interdisciplinary programs that combine, technical skills with the sustainability education. So just to share with you, in our finance discipline, especially those who are doing research in that space, really investing their time to create some programs with the cross-disciplinary across the university, and also internationally they're collaborating to create some programs where our students get exposure internationally and as well as domestically. In terms of the social equity and inclusion, so obviously ESG matters just like the workforce diversity, equity, and inclusion is becoming increasingly important, and in fact becoming more like a critical matrix to measure your performance. Like at the University of Sydney, what proportion of Indigenous or Aboriginal students we are, giving, say, scholarships or studying in the ESG and sustainability space. Same goes with the international students. We are also doing that. And even our workforce, we would like to have recruited talents that are diverse backgrounds in terms of their cultures, their ethnicity, and these are forming as part of our matrix as well. And so the other thing is the sustainable finance products. So we already heard that some of the banks in Australia and worldwide, they are, giving like sustainable loans or green bonds they're issuing, and more like a responsible asset categories. They are coming up with a new product. So again, our students needs to learn those and inform them that what they are and how they can even value those assets and what are the risks involved in those assets, and in a greater society, how they can have a bigger impact. So we need to educate our students with all this. And finally, educating our future leaders. So in the 21st century, especially the ESG and AI, those two aspects are, taking a lot of attention at the moment. So teaching in this space is really important, and basically showing the students that the financial materiality of the ESG, like what kind of impact. Some of the impacts are measurable, some of the impacts are only visible, and some of the impacts are only, I guess, you can only feel it. Like, for example, when it is extreme heat, yes, temperature-wise we can measure it, but you also feel it. And like storms, we had in Australia, especially in Sydney, I noticed there's a drastic change in the climate, in the climate and temperature. Suddenly we'll have like storms and very strong winds, and some of them has a devastating impact even with some of the businesses, especially with the flash flooding and things like that. So these things are very real. It does impact small businesses as well as the large businesses. So the next one, just to give you where we are at globally, just an overview. So in terms of self-reporting, it seems like in the Asia Pacific region, especially last 2 years, we can see that a lot of companies are reporting. It's obviously not as part of requirement by the government, but they're just self-reporting. Now that I will come back to that a bit later. And then Europe, we have got America as well as the Middle East and Africa at the lowest in terms of the reporting. And on the right, it basically shows that the G20 countries, how the policy and the requirements are, especially in the space of ESG reporting or ESG policies and regulations, are increasing. We can see that there's more regulations happening in the G20 members. But other countries who are also, small countries, they are also increasingly investing more to be able to comply with the policies and the regulations. So I'm just going to wrap it up with one of my research. This is the research I have done, especially looking into the ESG risk, how it spills over to its peers, and why it is important to look into. So what is ESG risk? It essentially means that it refers to the potential negative financial implication that the environmental, social, and governance factors can have on a company's performance. And basically what we do is we compare two different types of firms. One is a multinational corporations and another is a domestic one. Domestic one basically does not have any or domestic corporations that do not have any subsidiaries or anything overseas, where the multinationals, we know that they're very large. The reason why we wanted to compare the two is because multinationals are notorious to contribute to the pollution and the carbon emission. And as you can see, the ESG risk that is borne by the multinationals, which is highlighted in the blue line, is usually higher, much higher. It's actually very highly significant relative to the domestics corporations. So again, what we find is that it is we reconfirmed actually that the Senate inquiry suggested that there's about 57% of the Australian firms are engaging in greenwashing. So recall one of the graph I showed that, the reporting increased in the Asia Pacific. If you remember this graph on here on the top. Now, some of these reportings are self-serving and not genuinely all these companies are actually complying with the ESG. So that's what we also demonstrate. In fact, this number is actually much higher among the multinational corporations. And then, so again, those risks that we investigated, these are like the environmental risk. These risks are born because of the sudden climate change, or it could be the resource depletion because we are not, especially Australia is very resource-based country. And some of the Aboriginal lands are actually being confiscated for mining purposes and not so environmentally friendly type of business purposes. So that can also create risk. Pollution and waste management. Again, we are working on it, but we are not the best per se. Social risk is also can be arised because of the labor practices, employees' rights and working conditions, and also like, for example, compliance with the labor laws, whether, payment, whether we are paying them all right, and so on and so forth. Human rights, again, the discriminations and like child labor. Thankfully, we don't have it here in Australia, but through supply chain, especially Australia, we are a consumer of many products which are actually manufactured internationally. And so therefore, through the supply chain, those who are actually either building or producing those products could be in countries where human rights are violated and there's a child labors are very prominent. And so those kind of risks falls under the social risk. And of course, we have got the governance risk because corporations, many corporations, they engage in some malpractices, I would say, especially whitewashing what they say. That's not what they actually do. Greenwashing again, and the executive compensations. They are paying all these CEOs such a high salary because with that expectation that they will be compliant with the sustainable type of business practices. But in reality, whether they do it, it is something that needs to be also considered. So what we find essentially is that those risks does actually spill over to their competing companies. So one has to be very careful, especially if they're working within the same sector. And once they follow the other company, what they are doing, they have to make sure, the followers has to make sure that the companies that they're following or trying to compete against, they are legitimately ESG compliant and genuinely they're doing something to be sustainable and they're not engaged in greenwashing. So especially if you're following a greenwasher, you are bound to, not do so well in the public eyes or in the society's eyes, and it will come back to haunt you basically. What we also find is that the greenwashing companies, their performance, yes, there is a little negative impact on their performance, especially if they are accused of greenwashing. However, that impact kind of bounces back very quickly. The reason being is that at the moment, there's no penalty for someone to engage in greenwashing. And these companies, when there's no penalty, it doesn't materialize for them, right? And again, even if they are prosecuted, the penalty, even if they are found to be guilty, what is their penalty? Because the court can't give them any penalty. There's no guideline for them to follow per se, or they haven't broken any policy per se. Unethicalness is not unlawful per se, right? So this is what we find. So therefore, it is extremely important that people understand what greenwashing even means, because if more and more businesses are engaged in greenwashing, then it beats the whole purpose of compliance with sustainability or even being compliant with the UN SDGs per se. So again, to conclude, essentially what I would like to say is we need to educate our younger generation as well as our senior generations as well, to be those who are not exactly well informed what ESG is supposed to be, and even when they are, investing their retirement funds, which companies they're investing, and whether they know how to look for a genuine company that is compliant with the ESG. That is all for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shumai. This is very comprehensive, covering many aspects of the research topics these days, and they're all very important. And actually, one thing particularly kind of, because I always do international comparisons, so notice is, on the self-reporting, actually, the Asian Pacific region are quite ahead, leading in terms of self-reporting. But in terms of, at least from the UNPRME perspective, when we are looking at the signatory members of this PRME, I actually finding not so many in China, particularly in China. So we have lots of university, but almost this very less than 2 hands of signatory member of PRME. So this is something interesting to looking at. So in the QA session, you can see in the button QA, there was someone, I think Anna, she is doing coordinating a task that she would very much welcome the Chinese schools to collaborate. So yes, anyway, so now we can open the floor to the audience. So audience, please, if you have any questions, just type in the QA section. I will be able to see. So, and yes, all speakers, all audience are welcome to raise questions. And then for myself, I very much would like to follow up at least 2 questions to the panelists here. One first question is very much following the, what we was talking about on the regulation. So what do any one of you can chip in to answer, to offer your opinion here? So what do you think the regulator or the public policy or the policy makers can do in terms of regulates the market or regulates the finance that could further help the sustainable development? Any of you?
I'm happy
Yes.
to go first, if I may.
Go ahead.
I think what the regulators and the policymakers, what they're doing is they are making policies without being well informed, meaning they need data-driven evidence so that their policies will make sense. Because sometimes the problems are with the policies and regulations is that once it's established, it's very hard to revise them, or it takes much longer to revise. And once you establish it, you might as well take the time to establish a policy that is sustainable and it makes sense. So most of the time, these policies are made in a rush just because they want to either comply with the UN SDGs or whatever their goals are. What I find is that there is a disconnection between the policymakers and regulators and the researchers, the actual researchers, like at the universities. And we are the one who actually have got the data-driven evidence to share with them. And that's where they need the insightful, that's where they can get the insightful information so that their policy makes sense and it is going to be made for the betterment of the society, basically. I think that's where the disconnection is. And so therefore, obviously, it has to go both ways. The regulators and policymakers needs to work with us, or at least, hear us out, what we have to share. And likewise, the university also needs to reach out to them, basically, to share what we are finding. And so that the policies and regulations are well informed and more functionable rather than dysfunctionality continues. That's all from me for this question.
Yeah, that's a very good point. This sort of coming back to Fiona, what you were saying earlier about the partnership, right? The collaboration between university and the public policy making. And I do see this needs even in the Chinese context. Yeah. Any of you have anything to add on this question?
Can I add a bit?
Go ahead, Karok.
Yeah, I mean that the way I think about actually that in Hong Kong, I just mentioned that next year that all the companies are really required to have this climate-related risk disclosure. And from what I really see that most of the companies are not really ready. In fact, that I would say that the timeline, I mean, that in fact have been pushed already, have been postponed. But anyhow, I think that one thing I do want to really to say a bit sympathy with the regulator is that you just can't wait until so-called all the companies are ready. You need to really set a deadline, a timeline, and then put the pressure on that. But of course, it still comes down to the issue now that when it's effective, do we really have enough of the people we know that how to do it? And therefore, I would just say that that's why you go back to the talent issue. We just don't have enough the manpower to deal with it. And this is the part that, on one hand, I would say that the regulators, that of course, that they need to really set the timeline. On the other hand, I would say the policymakers should also think about how that you can really channel more of the resources and then to really promote of the training in the manpower to really comply with the regulation. Rather than that, now that the regulation might really be implemented, but it is really that halfway. I mean that we just don't really have the kind of people to really deliver to deliver the job.
That's a very good point. So basically, you're addressing, either we have this ecosystem running at a lower level, not going forward, or the ecosystem can't go in like whole thing going forward, but we need some external kind of push where the government, in one way to push for this change, on the other way to also provide resources to help the companies or the even education to get ready will help, right? This naturally leads to my next question, actually. What do you see in actually there's two aspects here. One is in our business school education, what do you see, the main say something you want to do, but there is not enough support from the industry or from the government or the system constraints allowing you not to be able to implement this innovation or not enough supports from the industry. Another thing is, do you see how much the corporation value our students who are equipped with those sustainable knowledges or skills? So any of you can add on, contribute on this, answering this question.
Maybe, Julia, I can chip in here. Also in relation to the previous question as well, to a certain extent.
Okay.
Obviously, the public policymakers, the regulations tend to be slower than the industry practices. So industry tends to be the pioneer, okay? In, for example, the equitable, principles, principles for responsible investment, for example, PRI, all these things were started from the industry, from HSBC, from JP Morgan, and so on and so forth, for example. Yeah. Then it would turn into like industry standards. The industry standards would translate into national regulations to a certain extent. So SDG, for example, Sustainable Development Goals, I think was, advocated by United Nations in 2015. But at least 20 years earlier, some of the leading industry players were already advocating for green finance, okay, for sustainable development. When I was working at ABN AMRO Bank, which is a Dutch bank, I think it was 2001, I believe, we were already talking about equitable principles. That means like, every lending and credit extension, you have to go through so-called like that kind of principle. That means what's the impact on the environment? Okay. So we started with the CSR, corporate social responsibility. Then it turned into ESG nowadays. Okay. So to that extent, I think Europe in general is leading the overall industry practices. And I think the European Union is probably a leader in some of the regulations as well. Yeah. But for Asia, for China in particular, for example, the Industrial Bank of China, which is one of the largest banks in China, but they are not very international. But they are the ESG bank from China. So they were the first bank from China who join the green finance principles. So, and of course, the end group, like you know, in digital finance, they are very quick in taking advantage of their own technology to help so-called like green finance, okay, inclusive finance, and so on and so forth. So I think to answer that question, I think the industry and academia and the public policymakers needs to collaborate more, but also internationally, we're not talking enough to each other to a certain extent, because United Nations can say everything, but the national governments, they have the power to do certain things. Global multinational companies, they can lead in many ways. The global university like us, we should talk more to each other. And of course, which will help, you know, I think the national governments to coordinate in terms of regulation, the rules and the policies. Okay, so that's I will stop here again.
That's very valuable insights. And yeah, the collaboration between academics, industry, and the policy, and the international collaboration, the sharing, and forming standards. I think maybe that's exactly why, you know, the United Nations, this to do this. Sort of, we have this PME has United Nations at the back, and the academic alliance could sort of fill in this gap. So seems we could do, there's more for us to do. And because UN has influence internationally, not only to the government, and now through also on the industry, and also now through the academic alliance, also adding the academic into this. This is very, very good point. Thank you, Ben. Excellent. And so I see anyone wants to add on this? Yeah, Fiona, go ahead.
If I may, I actually have a last slide to share, which I think encapsulates exactly what we are talking about right now. So if you'll indulge me, there, I think that's it. I'm assuming everyone can see this. But one of the things that, and I think it's very much in line with what we are talking about. When we're talking about regulators, when we're talking about compliance, I'm wondering whether we can push the envelope even further to ask about rethinking how government, industry, and academia work together. If I may be so bold as to point out that, yeah, by the way, this is probably relationships 101. Any relationship study would be able to tell you that, you know, what you really want to do is drive a common purpose, have open and regular communications, and very flexible relationships. What I think I want to highlight, though, is this one aspect of this common purpose and direction, which is trust and collaboration. If I may be so bold as to suggest that when we talk about regulation and we talk about compliance, it seems that underpinning that is a failure to trust or an inability to trust. You know, regulators ask for reports primarily because they do not expect industry to follow. Industry complains about academia being not producing graduates that are up to snuff, and government is always blamed for any policy, whether it's going forward or going backwards. So, and trust has always been highlighted. You know, political trust, social trust has been an underpinning, has been underpinning a lot of studies in regards to strong and happy citizens, happy countries, and also successful work relations. So it'll be very interesting, I think, when we talk about partnerships, if we were to actually delve into why the partnerships may not be working as well as they are or should be.
Totally agree, Fiona. This is a very interesting perspective. It's a very innovative perspective. You know, we are talking about how we innovate the education and technology to achieve sustainable development. Actually, the partnership itself needs a more new innovative perspective to think about it. And this could, you know, really pushing us probably also add the interdisciplinary different, fields of public. I'm actually now that's why I'm in public policy, because I start to realize as well, but I don't formulate the good perspective like you. And so it's really to push about thinking about how different organizations, the government policy making, the industry profitability, and the academic knowledge creating, how they can work together to achieve a sort of a whole world changing the new goal, rather than probably previously each was sitting on each operation level, what I can have from the other institutions. So what you're suggesting is a total new perspective. And okay, so good. So thank you, Fiona. So in the QA, there's a question from the audience. Actually, this is exactly the move to interdisciplinary is a major theme in sustainability education. Could you mention examples of initiatives, programs, and collaborations? I would suspect he means in your business school or your School of Economics and Public Policy. Do you have any examples that combine this interdisciplinary?
Maybe I can say a bit.
Okay.
Okay, about that, my university, my business school at the City University of Hong Kong. I just want to say that I just joined this university business school for about 8 months, but I'm very happy to see that we do have quite a bit of the development, especially on that interdisciplinary collaboration side. One thing I want to mention is we on our education side, on the program side, we had a collaboration with the School of Energy and Environment. Well, thanks to that school, and then we are able to establish, it is an undergraduate program. We call it it's called Environment Science and Sustainable Business. Because that I have really been looking at various curriculum in the business school. Sometimes I think that our curriculum might be just focused more on the business side, but however, without we regard of really the core material on the environment. For example, when I think about that, this newly established collaborative program, I mean, that I think that a very important part is for our students to understand the environmental issues, to understand the energy issues, to understand that, for example, the technology about like this renewable energy, about the storage of the energy, and etc. Because that's really the core part of really this the sustainable sustainability issue. That's the first thing I want to mention. The other part is more on the research side. I'm also happy to report that we are going to really have a center set up, not at the business school level, but at the university level. It is really a center for sustainability that cut across the business school and the social science. It's not yet about the core science, but it is really focused on the interplay of the business and also the social part. And therefore that we are also focusing, besides of the business sustainability, also thinking about the social issues. And therefore, like, for example, next week that we have a keynote, we have a keynote speaker, Professor Jim Hackman. He's going to talk about the education, the equality and access to education. So it is trying to really bring up to speed our students of understanding that how that the business and then can really react, I mean, that to interplay with some of the social issues.
That's great. That's really great. And I personally see a lot of synergies among them. I have been moving from the finance business school to the public policy side, so I do see a lot of synergy there. And yeah, congratulations. I think it will be a success.
Thank you.
Ben didn't say anything, Ben. We actually have one too, not necessarily on the interdisciplinary on the by the measure, but more from the international collaboration perspective. We see so much, China in its own system doing many things different. Like ESG, China is very forefront, but not necessarily using the same standards approach. And so in ZIPS, we have this communication. China, was it called? Global, global GMG, right? So
we have quite a few, because we have the so-called 5I principles. One of the I is actually interdisciplinary.
Yes,
so everything we do, we are supposed to be at least, okay? We aspire to be taking a interdisciplinary approach.
Yes.
So the program, Julia, you are referring to is like a math, communication and management, for example.
Yes. Because that one is very unique. I haven't seen that in other business school, and this is a very unique one in ZIPS. And giving the China's, growing influence on the global, being understood is very important. Yeah. And so now we move to the last question. Can we think of any company visionaries on this front? Who are the role model? Any company we can think of who have been really coming into this, sustainable development and collaboration?
Well, in Australia, if I may jump in, we have Mike Cannon-Brookes, for instance, who, and then and while Andrew Forrest has a reputation for a number of things, he is also driving this move towards zero carbon emissions. In Poland, if I may, I want to venture to pronounce his name, Wojciech Dąbrowski is a CEO of the Poland's General Power. So he's actually a CEO reliant on coal, who is standing out to make the claim that we should move away from coal. There are certainly some role models. I think it's more important to address Anna's question about in addressing Anna's question, I'm already signaling that we fall very quickly into the trap of one person spearheading this, right? One person, one vision. And what we are really trying to do is to move away from that one person, one vision to collaborative vision and propelling us to move in that direction. Because one person, one vision eventually means that we have a succession problem.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Julia, the names I mentioned, we are working with, I think they are leaders in their respective industry in terms of sustainability initiative. I mentioned HSBC, for example, as a global bank. They are publicly committed, certain amounts, net zero targets, all these things, okay? And they are doing this, taking it very seriously. Ant Group, for example, they have a so-called Ant Forest initiative. That means through the fintech technology, every user, about 1 billion, Alipay user, if you use that for certain initiative, they will accumulate certain carbon credit, and they will use that to plant trees, the real trees, okay? In China, that has been getting a lot of recognition from the United Nations and the World Bank,
Yes.
And the third, the name like Johnson Control, which is a global leader, headquartered in Ireland, but the original from the United States, Milwaukee. They are doing their very best in trying to have the smart buildings, okay? Because of the buildings in the urban cities, they are contributing a significant percentage of the carbon emission. So they are doing that, they are saying this, but they are also working with others as well. So these are a few examples I would say they are at the forefront. Okay. Yeah.
That's very good. So that means there's quite a lot of industry models there, but like Fiona says, how we change those, how we kind of transform those individual pioneers then to groups of them, like Ben has been mentioned about some of them working together, then forming an industry standards or model or translate into policy or regulated standards is going to be very important. I actually see academics could help in this process, like what Ben mentioned about this green credits with trees. I'm actually doing a project in terms of how bank loans involves in this, and actually I'm doing a theoretical work, so I can hope transforming a model that can be used not only in China, that could be generalized to other countries. And I think in many other aspects, many things like that can do. You know, if academics can formulate them into something, a model or a generalizable thing, it was a big step towards achieving policy. Yeah.
And maybe, Julia, if I know I may be talking a little bit too much, but I just want to send out an invitation to everybody, because recently we were working with the Cambridge Judge Business School at the student level, at the MBA student level. We invite 10 Judge Business School students to join ZIPS students into 2 project groups focused on the ESG. We work with the partner Ant Group. We worked with the Industrial Bank, which is the leading ESG bank from China. And they were working as consultant, for the companies. So the response so far has been overwhelming, and I would like to extend and expand that kind of scope of collaboration with Fiona, with Carlo, and with Shumi, with anybody who is online, okay?
Yes, I have been working with Ben, so I'm very impressed by his energy, his entrepreneurship. So any audience, if interested in those initiatives he's doing, just reach to him. And thank you all so much. This is a very knowledgeable, informative, and insightful sharing. And I myself learned so much from it. And many of your answers and questions and answers are very inspiring. And thank you to all the panelists, and thank you to the audience. And particularly, we should thank the United Nations PIME organization to make this global forum possible, and for us to come together to sharing our knowledge and vision. Thank you all.
Julia. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you. Thank you very
very
much.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this.